And we're back after a brief break. South Texas Crossfire, and we're here. Don't forget our sponsors, River City Hospice. Give them a call to learn about hospice. 882-5900, 882-5900. Call today or visit rivercityhospice.com to find out more, or friend them on the internet. Also on Facebook. And also, don't forget to tune in with floreslawfirm.com. Watch us, follow us, like us right there, floreslawfirm.com. And also our sponsors, Vasquez Flores Home Health, 881-9922. Want to start an exciting career in healthcare or keep your loved one out of a nursing home? Nursing homes have their place, but your loved ones also deserve to have the autonomy, if they can, to stay at home. With me today, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing a great friend of mine, and also a person who's been a journalist, publisher, Homero Villarreal of El Defensor magazine. Welcome, Homero. How are you?
And now we got El Pueblito, of course.
Yes, and El Pueblito also. We got to give that a plug. Thank you for being here. And we just, I don't like to date my programs, but we are honoring a great judge of the 319th District Court, and that would be Tom Greenwell there in Nueces County. Let's talk a little bit about your experiences with him and when you first met him.
Well, a little bit about Tom Greenwell. I think he was a valued professional. He was the first one that ran countywide for a judicial post as a Republican and won. And it was a hard struggle back then. You got to keep in mind there wasn't a bipartisan environment as we see today. In the late 80s and 90s, but he was this, once people got to know him, he was this meteorite that sort of lit up Nueces County. You know, he came in and shared his bipartisan spirit and respect for the La Cultura Mexicana, you know, that he wasn't here to impose his ways or anything, but to share with others and grow with others. And the courthouse, those that orbited the courthouse loved him. He was his collective identity. He graduated from Georgetown University in 1970, late 1970s, and with a degree in political science and journalism, believe it or not. Right after that, he goes into the University of Texas Law School, and within 3 years he graduated with honors by '81. That same year he became enrolled here, part of the staff of the 13th Court of Appeals, mostly as a researcher, later as the head of the legal staff for the 13th Court of Appeals. He became from 1991 to 1996, I believe. Then he went into private practice, and in private practice, he that's where his true independent political identity away. Remember, he had been connected with a courthouse for so long. He knew all the families, had all these relationships that he had created. So this was really his powerhouse, the courthouse. Remember, the courthouse, sort of the cream of the crop. That's where all the people that pretty much are in. They're sort of in the balcony up there. They're in positions, in thrones, and if we were to see medieval Europe, there would probably be kings and queens.
The Medicis, perhaps.
Yeah. I'm talking about in terms of power,
Sure.
the perception for the community. So there he was among the politiqueras, the different echelons of, and he learned. But as a researcher, he showed his legal prowess. Of course, he was an intellectual.
Very much so.
Here you had this small man, thick glasses, walking around, shaking hands, very approachable, amiable. Input from the people, and he learned a lot. But at the same time, he was creating a network, and to the very last day of his life, you know, he died at the courthouse. That's something very symbolic that people haven't pointed out. That was his family. That was his collective identity. That was the wrinkle in his heart of who he was, that penetralia of his essence. But anyway, he goes out in private practice. And remember, the 80s and 90s. 80s were Reagan years, of course, where Reagan redefined the Republican Party, recruited professionals, the anti-lawsuit abuse movement, Reagan recruiting churches, creating nonprofit religious institutions that could receive federal funding and state funding. That was sort of a lure to bring in also the religious movement into the Republican Party. This was what was happening in Corpus Christi at the time. You also had Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse from the Valley transfer over to Corpus Christi. CPNL, Gonzalo Sandoval, the presidente del running CPNL at the time, came here. He was, by the way, the first president of the Citizens Against Lawsuit Abuse, formed in the Chamber of Commerce in Westlaco, I believe. They came to the area and there were political intentions. So here was Greenwell, runs for district court. At that time, there was almost no Republican Party. The Republican Party that you had they had a little funding from the state. They had a skeleton budget. Some of the players, just to mention, of course, you had corporate lawyer Lance Brune. You had Robert Pate, who was appointed, I think, 2 times by the governor to be a district judge. Never could get reelected.
Was defeated by Roosevelt.
Yeah, and the political base or structure of the Republican Party was not there, and they sort of re-examined the structure. You know, there were these particles of Republican political movement activity. But there was no big structure. The president, viejito, this old man, Joe Yao, and everybody.
Joe Yao, yes.
He started going to the coffee clubs, orbiting the right places. Very sociable, a traditional approach. He created the initial network for the Republican Party here in Nueces County. Then it grew in Jim Wells and Claiborne County, and now you see changes there also in some of those counties. But basically, they re-examined why Republicans weren't winning. And they looked at the recipe. What is their recipe? I'm just going to share a few glimpses. And that's, of course, Tom Greenwell, the great intellectual. And he discovered that people over 30 were pretty much in the old traditional Democratic Party. And he started targeting people at a certain age group, preparing them for the next election, where he ran the next round against Marty Huerta, I think in 91, 92. He won.
I think 2002.
Yeah.
2002.
Yeah, 2000,
yes.
Excuse me. Late 90s, he ran the first time.
He kept
running.
He kept running. And
so
then
in 2000,
the third time,
in 2001, 2001.
campaign.
And in 2002 was when he took office.
And that's when the doctors went and picketed the courthouse in a historical manner.
Again, he had found a new group that was disenchanted. Remember, the Democratic Party had been in power for so long that. But the key was for the Republican Party, they needed a candidate that could bring bipartisan support.
And that was Tom.
And he was Tom Greenwell. All his staff that he shows, he made sure that they had this bipartisan spirit. He had conservative values. People might say, well, he wasn't that political. Well, I knew Tom Greenwell, and Tom Greenwell believed in some very fundamental beliefs of the Republican Party. And as a judge, the partisan thing might not be there, but the spirit of the values is in the courtroom and will always be, and from my estimation, of course. But I think he was as soft as a judge. You know, he was as soft as the misty cloud, but when he dealt with hardcore criminals, that tenebrific evil of murderers, he was as tough as steel, as the toughest judge around. He became one of the most respected professionals at the courthouse. And his private life was his private life.
Right.
People were always milling around and trying to find something negative because he was a public figure. He was approached in 2006 about some incident, some young man he had helped that had a rebellious nature, and he said, "Hey, he's like my son. I'm trying to reach out." And then Mr. Greenwell was one of the most respected professionals, but I think his private life was his private life, his social life that he created. I remember a LULAC meeting. This is back then. Remember, this is during the 80s and 90s. He also had the rise of a new faction within the Democratic Party that was trying to kick the Ortiz faction, and all those people had been in power. The
I remember
Truans.
that very well.
You had René Rodriguez, Filemon Vela. And Filemon, I think, was more the money man initially, and René carried most of the weight in trying to coordinate. So there was a lot of squabbles within the party itself. René tried to run for office against Valdez, lost. Then they turned to running women, and then the formula
worked. Yeah.
And Greenwell blended very well. He was part of that courthouse. People realized as soon as they got. So what was some of the major variables? Well, most of the political friends that I have that analyze this, Greenwell, they compared him more to a dove. You have a hawk, and then you have your dove, and your dove is the person that puts this nice flavor, this good relationship.
He made people feel welcome in his court.
About what the Republican Party was.
Yeah.
I think he defined very smart man. He could define what it was really all about. Back then, they were demonizing Republicans. Even the coffee club started opening the doors to the Republican Party because of people like Greenwell. You now, to this day, now you can go even and it culminated. I remember when I went to a LULAC meeting and they were saying, you got this Republicano here, blah blah blah. You should have seen almost anybody in the Democratic Party defending Greenwell.
And
There was something there that he had cemented himself. He had created a psychic alloy with many of the major personalities. You got Connie Gutierrez. Here talk about Greenwell. Up here, talk about the civil rights leaders. They talk very highly of Greenwell. You talk about even Susie Luna to this day was one of her biggest opponents. You got all these politiqueras now that he completely altered the mindset. So what was really his I think his major political base was the courthouse culture. That,
you have Commissioner Joe Gonzalez on one side, Lloyd Neal on the other, and they both say he was a great man.
Was a great man, and I think there's a certain culture that has formed at the courthouse that is combining the best of both worlds, something that transcends race, something that transcends social class. Of course, Judge Gonzalez has been a major variable, a professional from law enforcement to several entities of the government and community projects that have helped humanize the system. And in the end, who was, now, he died in his chambers. And I think that was symbolic. He left a will behind, of course, giving everything to the young man that he felt was his son, Alberto Fuentes, I believe. And as far as family, he had no relatives in the area. He used to call me up and say, after a murder case and stuff like that, and decía, Homer, 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 Homer. He was always concerned about my struggles with the paper because one of his majors was journalism. And me decía, tell me something good that's happening out there. I mean, the stress used to get to him, People don't realize that they're a human being. that man worked. He had a day and night. I mean, so if you look at his whole educational and political career, he almost never rested. He had a long enough respite for his own personal growth and development, and away from the courthouse. So to the very last day, and what happens? Well, I think it shows that he was just very human. Every cell, every bone, every nerve of his system um, um, uh, told him to be there at that last moment, because that was su familia, that was su cultura, and that was the best of what he had seen. And it also shows that human beings are fragile. I mean, no matter how strong we believe, everybody cracks. He showed that a judge can be like a piece of glass that you step on, and it hurts. And so I think that very last statement sent ripples through the
It
courthouse
reminds us. It reminds us of the,
to humanize and give feeling to that courthouse, that the law, a man who stood for the law, a respected professional, somebody that would never expect would self-destruct, would self-murder himself, send a sort of a rational suicide, a Kiri,
Harakiri,
Japanese.
yeah.
You know, you had your in essence. Remember, he was up for re-election this time around. There were rumors that they were going to bombard him with a extremely negative campaign. I don't know. There was one fact. I think there were several variables involved that hit him all at once, and that can happen to any of us.
Push him over the edge.
But as far as to iterate, and my final point, again, I'm getting kind of emotional here, is that he was one of the most respected professionals, and his personal life was his personal life.
Well, I want to thank Homero Villarreal for stopping by with us, and we're running out of time, but Homero Villarreal, el Defensor, and we dedicate this whole program to the Honorable Tom Greenwell, 319th District Court. You are remembered, never forgotten, and you were respected and loved by all of us in the legal community and the community in general. Thank you, and God bless.
Okay.